They told me once that the forest remembers everything that happens beneath its canopy. It doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, it just waits. I used to think that was a poetic thing old rangers said to scare rookies, a superstition carried over from the tribal stories carved into the rocks that surround the fire tower I now call home. But after what happened last year, I've started to believe the forest doesn't just remember, it collects. My name isn't important anymore. What matters is that I've spent the last 14 years working as a ranger in the northern ranges of Washington state, deep in the Cascades, where the pines rise taller than church spires and the fog crawls like a living thing through the underbrush. I came here because I thought isolation was peace. I thought being alone with the trees would quiet the noise that followed me out of my old life, the arguments, the guilt, the constant pulse of failure that came with city living. Out here, I thought I could start over. The district is massive. Most of it is inaccessible except by ATV or horseback. There are canyons that swallow radio signals and trails that appear and vanish depending on the light. People go missing sometimes, hikers, campers, hunters. It's part of the job. Most come back, some don't. And every time we can't find them, we tell ourselves the same thing. They went off trail, underestimated the cold, maybe slipped, maybe fell. The forest doesn't care about intent. It's vast, and it hides what it wants. When I first started, I used to keep a journal. Not a field report, but a personal record of sounds, smells, and things that didn't belong. It was my way of staying grounded. Sometimes I'd write down the smell of rot carried on the wind even though it hadn't rained for days, or the rhythmic knocking that echoed from the valleys at night, too steady, too deliberate to be woodpeckers. Once I heard what sounded like a child crying somewhere out past mile marker 12. I went out with a flashlight and a rifle, thinking maybe it was an injured camper. But when I followed the sound to the dry riverbed, the cries stopped, and all that was left was the sound of my own breathing. That was 7 years ago. I never wrote about it again. I used to share stories like that with the others at the ranger station, the old-timers who'd been here before I was born. There was Roger, who'd been working these woods since the 70s, and May, the only one who could navigate the ridgelines in a blizzard. They'd just shake their heads and tell me I was hearing the debt being collected. I didn't know what they meant until last winter. It started the week before the full moon in February. The snowmelt had begun early, and the forest was waking up. I was covering the north sector alone that week, checking culverts and washouts along the service roads. On the second night, the radio crackled to life with static and a voice I didn't recognize. It wasn't dispatch. It was low, dragging, like someone talking through sleep. It said my name twice, then went quiet. I called back, thinking maybe it was interference from a nearby repeater. Nothing answered. Only static, and then a sound behind the noise, something like breathing, slow, patient, like it was waiting for me to say something back. When I returned to the tower that night, my generator was still running, but all my lanterns were out. The logs I'd left stacked by the door were scattered across the snow, and there were boot prints around the base of the stairs, one set going up, one going down. I was the only one assigned to this sector. I climbed up with my flashlight shaking in my hand, half expecting to find some lost hiker waiting by the stove. But the cabin was empty. Everything was where I left it except for my journal. It was lying open on the floor, pages torn like someone had flipped through it in a hurry. The last entry was the one I'd written 7 years ago about the crying child by the riverbed, except someone had underlined a line near the end. It stopped as soon as I reached the water. Underneath, in what looked like pencil, someone had written, "Don't cross the water when it calls." That's when I started noticing the rhythm of the forest changing. Birds would go silent long before nightfall. Coyotes would circle the clearing but never cross into it. And every evening when the moon rose over the ridge, I'd hear that same faint knocking in the distance, steady, deliberate, echoing like something counting down. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. always in sets of 3. I told myself it was trees shifting in the wind. That's what we all do out here when we're afraid. We rationalize. But the truth is, it felt like a warning, or worse, an invitation. A few days later, I got a call from May on the shortwave. She said a hiker had gone missing near the old fire road, a man in his 30s, last seen camping near the creek. She asked me to check the area before nightfall. It was already late afternoon, but I said yes. That's what we do. We look for the lost, even when the light's gone. The forest was strangely quiet as I made my way down. The creek was half frozen, trickling weakly beneath a crust of ice. I followed the trail until I found the man's camp. Tent half collapsed, sleeping bag inside, a small fire pit surrounded by boot prints that led straight into the water. No sign of a struggle, just tracks that ended at the edge of the creek, like he'd walked straight in and never come out. I radioed May, but the line was full of static again. That same low hiss like breath against glass. I turned to leave, and that's when I saw it. Across the creek, half hidden by fog. A shape, standing upright, taller than any man I'd ever seen. Broad shoulders, arms hanging low, head cocked as if studying me. For a moment I thought it was a tree stump. Then it moved. Just a slow, deliberate shift of weight, but it was enough to send every instinct in me screaming. I don't remember running back to the truck. I just remember the sound of my boots crunching through snow and the feeling that something was pacing me just beyond the tree line. Every few seconds, I'd hear that knock again, 3 times, then silence. And the air grew warmer the farther I ran, like the forest itself was exhaling heat through its lungs. When I reached the truck, I locked the doors and sat there until the sky turned black. The knocking stopped, but something else replaced it. A faint humming, almost like a voice, low and distant, coming from the direction of the creek. I told myself I was exhausted, that my mind was making patterns out of noise. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something standing in the middle of the road behind me. Still. Watching. It didn't move when I started the engine. It didn't move when I backed away. Only when I turned the headlights on full did it tilt its head back. And in that brief flash of white light, I saw what looked like a face. Not human, not animal, just something between. That was the night I stopped believing in the safety of daylight. The next morning, I woke to the sound of tapping on the tower's outer wall. It was soft, rhythmic. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I froze in my cot. The sun hadn't even risen yet, and the fog outside was so thick it looked like milk poured over the mountains. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. Whatever it was, it stayed just out of sight. Then I remembered the tracks around my tower from the night before. The boot prints that weren't mine. I grabbed my flashlight and the shotgun we kept in the corner for bears. The tapping stopped as soon as I moved. I opened the door slowly, letting the cold bite into my face. The world outside was soundless. No birds, no wind, not even the creak of the trees. The air was so still it felt wrong. I circled the tower, checking the snow. No new tracks. Nothing disturbed. But I swear I could feel something watching me from inside that fog. When I went back in, I noticed something scratched into the frost on the window by my bunk. Letters smeared by a fingertip. It said, "The debt remains." I wiped it away with my sleeve and told myself someone was playing a prank. May, maybe. She liked to scare me when I got too serious. But that didn't explain the footprints or the missing hiker or why my journal had been moved. I spent the rest of that day patrolling the fire road, pretending everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the sense that the forest was waiting. The trees seemed to lean closer, the air thick with a smell I couldn't place. Metallic, almost sweet, like wet iron. Every so often, I thought I heard something moving parallel to me through the woods, not running, just pacing, matching my steps. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moon was nearly full, glowing white over the ridge, turning the snow into a field of glass. I sat by the window, staring out over the forest, when the radio crackled again. Static at first, then a faint voice. "Don't go to the creek." It was May's voice, but distorted, dragging through the static like it was underwater. I called back, asking where she was. No response, just breathing. Then softly a whisper, "It's coming for balance." I didn't understand what that meant until the next morning. I hiked out toward the creek to look for May, thinking maybe she'd gone searching for the missing hiker and her signal had cut out. The trail was half buried under new snow, but I followed it anyway. As I got closer, I saw fresh tracks, boots again, same tread as before, heading toward the water. Only this time there was something else beside them. Larger. Bare. The prints sank deep into the snow, wider than any human foot, long toes ending in sharp points. I crouched down and touched the edge of one. The snow was melted around it, still warm. I followed them until they reached the creek. There, on the opposite bank, something dark was hanging from a tree branch, a piece of fabric, torn, fluttering in the wind. I crossed the creek, ignoring the voice in my head that said not to. That line from my journal burned into my mind. Don't cross the water when it calls. The air grew colder the moment my boots touched the other side. It wasn't fabric, it was a park ranger's jacket. The patch was still visible, soaked through and stiff with frost. The name tag read, M. Anders. May. My stomach turned cold. I called her name until my throat was raw, but the forest swallowed my voice. That's when I saw it again, standing at the edge of the trees, half hidden in shadow. The same shape. Tall, hunched, almost human. Its head tilted slowly, the way a curious animal might study something small. The moment I raised my flashlight, it slipped behind the trees, silent as smoke. I wanted to run. Every instinct in me screamed to. But something deeper, something I can't explain, kept me rooted there. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition. Like some part of me already knew this thing, or what it wanted. I backed away slowly, crossed the creek again, and didn't look back until I reached the trailhead. When I returned to the tower, the sun was already sinking. I radioed for backup. No answer. Tried dispatch. Static. I even switched frequencies and got nothing but faint knocking on every channel. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. That night, I didn't light a fire. I didn't move. I just sat there, listening. Around midnight, the wind picked up. It sounded almost like voices carried through the branches, low and mournful, repeating something over and over in a rhythm that matched the knocks. I pressed my hands to my ears and whispered to myself just to hear my own voice. But even through that, I could hear the words forming, distant but clear. The forest remembers. The forest reclaims. I don't know how long I sat like that. When I finally looked outside, the moon was high, full, flooding the clearing with pale light. Something moved at the base of the tower. Slow, deliberate. I leaned forward, trying to see, and there it was again. It wasn't a trick of the fog this time. I saw its shape clearly, covered in dark, coarse hair, shoulders like boulders, arms nearly reaching the ground. It stood upright, but not comfortably, as if its bones weren't built for the posture it was forcing. Its eyes reflected the moonlight, twin glints of silver, and in one of its hands, dangling by the sleeve, was May's jacket. I couldn't breathe. The thing lifted its head, and I swear it spoke. Not in words, but in a sound that carried meaning anyway, a deep, throaty hum that felt like it was inside my chest more than my ears. The lantern on my table flickered and went out, and then it was gone, vanishing into the fog like it had never been there. When daylight came, I went down to check the snow. There were no tracks, no jacket, nothing disturbed. Only that same faint metallic smell hanging in the air, stronger now. By evening, dispatch finally reached me. They said May's signal had gone dead 2 nights earlier. Around the same time, I heard her voice on the radio. They were sending a search team, told me to hold my post until they arrived. But by then, I already knew they wouldn't find her, because the forest had taken its due, and I could feel it wasn't done yet. They arrived just after dawn, 4 of them, bundled in orange parkas, their breath hanging in the cold like smoke. I recognized 2 from the district office. Collins, a field tech with more optimism than sense, and Grant, an older ranger who'd trained me back when I was new. The other 2 were volunteers from a nearby search and rescue unit. They were talking and laughing when they stepped out of the truck, but the laughter faded fast once they looked around. There's something about this part of the forest, the way the light falls here, like it's been filtered through ash, that wipes the smile off anyone's face. Grant asked for a rundown of what I'd seen. I told him everything except the thing by the creek. I said I found May's jacket and signs of her crossing the water, but no further trace. I could see doubt flash across his face, but he didn't say anything. He'd been here long enough to know when something didn't add up. We set out toward the creek around noon. The temperature dropped the moment we left the service road. None of us said it out loud, but the silence pressed in like a physical thing. No birds, no rustle of branches, just our boots crunching in rhythm. At one point, Collins stopped and said he could hear whispering. We listened. Nothing. Just wind. But when we moved again, I thought I caught it too. A soft sound, like words being spoken under breath, just beneath hearing range. The closer we got to the creek, the worse it became. The smell hit first, that metallic sweetness I'd noticed before, stronger now, almost choking. Then we found the trees. They were carved. Deep, straight lines gouged into the trunks, forming symbols I didn't recognize. Circles intersected with slashes, strange geometric patterns that seemed to shimmer when the light hit them. Grant bent down to inspect one, tracing it with a gloved hand. Not animals, he muttered. Too deliberate, too clean. We reached the water by late afternoon. The ice was cracked where I'd crossed before, black water sliding beneath. The trees leaned in close here, their branches twisted together above us, forming a kind of ceiling. It felt like being inside a rib cage. Grant sent the volunteers downstream, while Collins and I checked the north bank. The snow was disturbed again. Not footprints this time, but impressions, like something heavy had dragged itself through. We followed them until they disappeared into the undergrowth. That's when we heard it. A sound like a low groan, deep and distant. The kind of sound that vibrates in your ribs. Collins looked at me, wide-eyed. What the hell was that? I didn't answer. Because I knew that sound. I'd heard it the night before, right before the lights went out. We followed it, though every step felt like moving through thicker air. The forest grew darker, even though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. Then we saw the cave. It wasn't marked on any map. A jagged tear in the rock face, wide enough for a man to crawl through, rimmed with ice. The sound came from inside. Rhythmic, like breathing, in and out, in and out. Collins wanted to radio for the others, but the signal was dead again. Static. Always static. We shined our flashlights into the opening. The beam hit something just beyond reach. A fragment of fabric caught on a rock, and beneath it, bones. At first, I thought they were animal. Then I saw the badge. May's. Collins swore under his breath, "We need to get out of here." But I couldn't move. The air pouring from the cave was warm, almost humid, carrying that same metallic scent. It felt alive, pulsing, as if the mountain itself were breathing. I stepped closer, my light trembling in my hand. The sound inside deepened, turning into something like a chant. Words I couldn't understand but somehow recognized. Old, rhythmic, measured to the same beat as the knocks I'd been hearing for days. 3 pulses. A pause. 3 more. I took one more step toward the mouth. That's when something moved inside. Fast. Deliberate. The flashlight caught the glint of an eye, too high off the ground to be human. Collins screamed. We both stumbled back as a shape lunged halfway out, not all the way, as if something invisible was holding it there. The light caught rough, wet skin, muscles shifting beneath hair that looked burned in places. Its face, if you could call it that, was long, distorted, a mixture of animal and man. Its mouth opened, showing teeth black with rot, and from somewhere deep in that throat came the sound of knocking, not with hands, but bones clacking together, perfectly timed. Then it stopped, frozen, watching us. The forest went completely still. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Collins whispered something. A prayer, maybe. I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. We ran until we couldn't breathe. We didn't stop until we reached the trucks. Grant and the volunteers came back hours later, empty-handed. When we told them what we'd seen, they said we were exhausted, hallucinating, maybe oxygen deprived. but they looked shaken, too. They'd found something downstream, a pile of stones stacked neatly in the shape of a man. And in the center, another ranger's badge, not May's, someone else's. That night, we camped by the service road, too afraid to stay in the tower. None of us slept. The wind carried strange sounds through the trees, low humming, then laughter that didn't sound quite human. Around midnight, Grant's radio turned on by itself. Static first, then a voice, clear as day. It was May. She was whispering the same phrase over and over, calm and almost gentle. The forest demands balance. Grant shut the radio off and threw it into the snow. Nobody spoke again until morning. When the sun came up, the others packed and left. Collins refused to come back. Grant said he'd file his report, but not to expect anyone to believe it. I stayed behind because part of me couldn't leave. Not yet. Something in those woods had taken May, and now I understood. It wasn't a random attack or a monster. It was ritual, something older than the trees themselves. Every full moon, the forest took something. A person, an offering, a debt, and I could feel it coming again. The moon was rising full that night. By dusk, the forest felt wrong again. Not just quiet, expectant. The air carried that strange metallic scent as if something beneath the soil was waking, stretching, ready to feed. I could feel it pressing in on me, not through sound, but through weight. Every step I took made the snow crackle louder than it should have, like the forest wanted to remind me how small I was. The others had left before noon. Their tire tracks were already filling with drifted snow, that is Alec, and for the first time in years I was alone here, entirely alone. But that night, being alone didn't feel like solitude. It felt like being watched by something that had always been here, something that had seen 1,000 rangers before me come and go, and had never forgotten the taste of one. I built a small fire outside the tower, not for warmth, but for noise. Flames made sound, and sound meant life. I kept my rifle by my knee, and the radio turned on, static whispering like a second heartbeat. I told myself I'd make it through the night, wait until morning, and then hike out. But the forest doesn't care about your plans. The moon rose, white and heavy, spilling light that made the snow look wet. The trees stretched their shadows like fingers across the clearing. Every so often the fire would pop, and I'd flinch, thinking it was footsteps. Around 10, the radio cut through the static again. A faint voice, May's, soft and slow, as though she were speaking through sleep. It remembers you. I froze. My hand went to the radio, but I didn't speak. The voice continued, You crossed the water. It remembers. I turned the volume down and sat there, trembling. The firelight flickered against the frost on the trees, and in that light, I saw movement. Small at first, branches shifting, snow falling, but then something larger, deeper in the tree line. A tall silhouette standing still between the pines. It was the same shape I'd seen by the creek, the same bent posture, the same silver reflection in its eyes, but there was more than one now. 2, then 3. They stood spaced apart, unmoving, each with that same deliberate stillness that only something pretending to be alive can manage. I stood up slowly, the rifle heavy in my hands, my breath clouded in front of me. For a moment I thought I saw faces in the fog, pale and stretched thin, human but not quite. One looked like May. The eyes were wrong, though. Empty, like they'd been scooped out and filled with light. The figures began to move closer, not walking, gliding. The snow didn't crunch beneath them. I raised the rifle, but my hands were shaking too much to aim. The radio clicked on again. Don't resist, the voice said. It only takes what it's owed. Something inside me cracked then. Not from fear, but from understanding. All these years, all the disappearances, all the stories whispered around ranger stations about debts and full moons, it wasn't folklore. It was a pattern. The forest demanded balance, and the rangers, the protectors of its boundaries, were its currency. I dropped the rifle. The fire guttered out in a gust of wind. The clearing was bathed in white light from the moon, and the air filled with a low hum, a vibration that came not from the ground, but from the trees themselves. Their trunks seemed to pulse. Then, from the forest's edge, one of them stepped forward. It was taller than any man, close to 9 feet. Its skin shimmered like wet bark, muscles shifting beneath patches of fur. It had the posture of something that once knew how to stand upright but had forgotten how. Its face was long, distorted, eyes silver and bright like the moon itself. It spoke without sound, a pressure against my mind that wasn't language but meaning. You entered when it called. You carry the echo. I stumbled back, shaking my head. Take what you want, I whispered. Just leave me alone. The creature tilted its head. Alone? The word rang inside my skull. You were never alone. You are the forest's voice now. Behind it, the other shapes moved closer. Their outlines flickered in the moonlight, sometimes human, sometimes not. I recognized the curve of a shoulder, a badge glinting faintly on a chest, May's jacket. Another form beside her wore Collins's bright orange parka. Their faces were pale and stretched thin like bark peeled from a tree. They weren't gone. They were part of it. The air grew thick with heat, that same metallic sweetness filling my lungs. My vision swam. The forest's hum turned to a rhythm, 3 pulses, a pause, 3 more. My heart began to beat in sync with it, faster, harder, until I thought it would burst. I fell to my knees. The shapes surrounded me now, forming a circle. I could hear the words again, those deep, old syllables that came from the cave. Only now I understood them, not through translation, but through memory. It was a ritual of exchange, a promise. Every full moon, one life for the forest's continued silence, and this time it had chosen me. The leader, if that's what it was, reached out a hand. Its skin was cold, rough as stone, but beneath it I felt something beating, slow and steady, like the pulse of the earth itself. My mind filled with images, fire towers collapsing, floods, storms, deaths from decades ago. Every time the forest had spared a town, a ranger had gone missing. Every protection had a cost. The creature leaned close. Its breath was warm against my ear. Give what you took. Balance must be kept. I realized then that I wasn't just chosen. I'd been marked the moment I crossed the creek. The forest's rule was simple. Do not answer when it calls. And I had. The air split with a sound like thunder, though the sky was clear. A flash of light poured through the trees, white as bone. I felt something pulling at me, not my body, but deeper, like the forest was reaching into my memories, stripping them away one by one. Every trail I'd hiked, every face I'd known, even May's voice, gone, dissolving into the hum, and then everything went silent. When I woke, it was morning. The fire was out, the snow untouched, no footprints, no blood, no signs of struggle. My rifle lay beside me, half buried in frost. For a long time, I thought maybe I'd dreamed it, but when I tried to stand, I saw my reflection in the ice near the tower. My eyes were no longer brown. They were silver, the same color as the moon. I packed my things that afternoon. The radio never turned back on. I didn't call dispatch. I just started walking, following the ridge down toward the valley. The forest was quiet again, peaceful even, as though nothing had ever happened. But as I passed the creek, I saw something in the water, a single ranger's badge glinting beneath the ice. It wasn't May's this time. It was mine. I left it there. Now when the full moon rises, I don't sleep. I feel the hum under my feet, faint but familiar. The forest doesn't speak to me in words anymore. It doesn't need to. I understand it now. Every living thing in these woods breathes because something once gave itself up to keep it alive. The forest demands its sacrifice. Always has, always will. And the worst part? Sometimes in the mirror of still water, I see myself standing there, taller, darker, watching the tower from the edge of the trees, waiting, because the forest doesn't forget its debts. It only changes who collects them. I used to think the Black Hills were the safest place in the world. When the sun cut through the pines and painted gold across the ridges, when the air tasted like sap and clean stone, I believed there was no darkness here that a ranger like me couldn't handle. Those were the days I trusted my flashlight, my training, and my own 2 eyes. Those were the days before I heard what was buried screaming to be free. My name is Cole. I'm 43 years old, and I've been a ranger here for nearly half my life. I know every forest road number, every logging scar, every hidden game trail the tourists never see. And I know the way the quiet can turn wrong, subtle at first, like the air holding its breath. The locals call this place Paha Sapa, the heart of everything that is. I learned that from a Lakota elder on one of my first patrols. He told me the Black Hills weren't named for their tree line. He said the land remembers blood and memory darkens the soil until it's nearly black. I laughed politely at the time. I was young. I thought he was using metaphors. I didn't understand that the land itself could hold onto wounds. I live alone in a small cabin tucked against a slope above Pactola Lake. When thunderstorms roll in, thunder cracks like mountains splitting in half. Some nights that violence matches what I feel inside, a thrill that comes from being the only line standing between people and the wild. But most nights, the dark presses against the windows, thick as fur, and I'm nothing more than prey pretending to be a protector. I started to feel that shift the first week of October. The busy season ended, campgrounds emptied, the silence deepened, my radio stayed quiet, and the forest felt like it was watching me again. It began on a routine missing person call, the kind we get every fall. A solo camper named Jasper had disappeared from a dispersed site near the limestone ridges west of Custer Peak. His girlfriend filed the report after 2 days of unanswered texts. They'd argued, she said he needed space and she didn't want to crowd him. Regret is something I hear a lot in this job. I drove out with another ranger, Mateo, late in the afternoon. Mateo was new, 26, hopeful, still believing this work was all sunsets and elk sightings. He'd never found what I found in the woods. Jasper's camp was neat. Fire pit cleaned, tent zipped, cooler still full. No sign of a struggle, no tracks leading away. The pine needles lay untouched, like the wind refused to disturb them. It felt like the site was waiting for something. I scanned the ground while Mateo checked belongings for IDs or notes. The longer I stared, the more wrong the forest felt. I couldn't explain it. Everything looked how it should, but the quiet was absolute. No squirrels, no birds, not even the usual groan of branches rubbing in the breeze. It was like the entire hillside was listening. Then I noticed the disturbed earth near the fire pit. A mound of dirt recently moved and wide, almost like someone dragged a log. "Mateo," I called. "Over here." He jogged over, brushing hair out of his eyes. "What do you think? Buried trash?" "No animals dug through it," I said. And Jasper didn't have a dog. I crouched and ran my fingers through the loose soil. It was damp, colder than the surrounding ground, almost refrigerated. A shiver climbed my wrist. "We should mark it and call search and rescue," Mateo said. "Could be a burrow, mountain lion den." But I knew this wasn't an animal. The mound wasn't shaped right, too deliberate. Before protocol caught up to me, I dug deeper with my hands. My heartbeat wrapped in my ears. I don't know why I kept going. Curiosity, dread, something heavier. The dirt gave way to fabric. Canvas. A bag. Not Jasper's. I froze. I didn't want to open it. Every rational bone in my body screamed that this was where my responsibility ended. Get back up, document the site, stop before I uncovered something I could never unsee. But something was inside that bag, and it wanted out. I unrolled the top. Bundles of twigs, feathers, bones tied with sinew, symbols painted in ochre and charcoal. I recognized one of the shapes from cultural training, a protection sigil used by the Lakota to bind spirits to the earth, meant to keep something contained below, never above. "Is it like an offering?" Mateo said behind me, voice cracking. "No," I whispered. "It's a warning." The wind surged suddenly, making the pines hiss. A long, low groan echoed through the ridge, like the mountain itself was exhaling. Mateo stumbled back, clutching his radio. "We shouldn't mess with this," he said. "Cole, cover it up. Please." His fear infected me. I wrapped the bag back in dirt as fast as I could, heart thudding like hooves charging. When the mound looked undisturbed again, I stood. The forest stayed silent, listening. We left markers for search and rescue, but I drove away with the uneasy feeling that we'd undone something ancient, something that didn't want to be touched. The missing camper was found 2 days later, or what was left of him, in a ravine 3 miles away. The body looked like it had been dragged through roots and rock, shredded from the inside out, like something had tried to pull him back into the earth. They ruled it animal predation, mountain lion most likely. But I'd seen lion kills. The bite patterns didn't match. And the eyes had been torn out, sockets filled with dirt. I didn't sleep after that. The elders say the forest takes payment when its warnings are ignored. For weeks, I tried to rationalize what we'd seen, tried to tell myself we didn't disturb anything, that the screams I heard in my dreams were just stress building after years of this job. But I couldn't ignore the signs. The way the wildlife shifted away from the area, the way my radio picked up static that sounded like a voice whispering in Lakota, a tongue I barely knew but somehow recognized. Then the knocking started. It was past midnight when I heard it, a slow, dull thud from outside my cabin wall. One knock, another, 3 evenly spaced like knuckles against wood. I sat up fast, pulse banging. The sound came from near my bedroom window, low to the ground, too low for a person. I grabbed my flashlight and edged to the glass. The beam cut into the night, swallowed by the pines beyond the clearing. When I pushed the window open, cold air rushed in and the knocking stopped. The forest stared back at me. I told myself it was a branch, wind, a deer brushing past. But in the morning, the prints beneath the window told a different story. Not paws, not hooves, bare human feet, and the dirt inside those footprints, black, like grave soil. Like what I'd dug up. I stood on the porch for a long time that morning, staring at those bare footprints like they were a message written in a language the forest expected me to understand. They led away from my cabin and into the pines, each indentation deep, heel first. Not the cautious step of someone wandering barefoot in the cold, but the stride of something confident enough to move without fear of the dark. I wanted to report it. I should have radioed it in immediately. But all I could think about was that canvas bag buried near Jasper's abandoned fire pit, and the feeling that the forest had been waiting for me to pull it loose. I brushed earth from the prints and tried to pretend the black soil under my nails wasn't staining more than just skin. By noon, I was back on duty, patrolling the ridgeline where we'd found the ritual bundle. Search and rescue marked Jasper's death as a cautionary statistic, but they didn't return to the burial site. They didn't see any connection. They didn't hear the subtle shift in the trees, like the whole hillside was holding a secret under its breath. Mateo walked a few paces ahead of me, quieter than usual. He kept glancing over his shoulder at the trail behind us, like he expected to see something following. His hand hovered near the bear spray strapped to his belt. I didn't blame him. "You hear it last night?" he asked finally. "Hear what?" He slowed, eyes sliding nervously back toward the denser part of the forest. "The knocking." My stomach dropped. "You heard it too?" "I thought it was animals at first," he whispered, "but it wasn't random. 3 taps, same pause, then again. It moved around my cabin like it was mapping the walls." He rubbed his arms against the chill that wasn't from the weather. "Cole, I don't think this is mountain lions." "No," I said softly. "I don't think so either." He swallowed hard. "Do you think Jasper dug something up? Something he wasn't supposed to?" I didn't answer, because the truth was worse. We had dug it up. We pushed onward until we reached the burial mound. Except now it wasn't a mound anymore. The dirt looked torn open, clawed, ripped apart like something beneath had forced its way out. Jagged lines radiated outward from the hole, as if roots had been overturned violently. Feathers from the ritual bundle lay scattered in the pine needles, their shafts snapped. The forest around us hummed. Not wind, a vibration, low, deep, wrong somehow. My pulse sank to it, my breath tight in my chest. "Say something," Mateo whispered. But my voice refused to come. That was when we smelled it, the scent of wet soil mixed with rot, like something freshly pulled from deep underground. A smell that clung to memory long after it left the air. We found tracks, not Jasper's, not boots, not shoes. Again, bare feet, but larger now, wider, as if the weight pressing into them had grown. And the gait, the strides stretched impossibly far between steps. No human could move like that. Mateo's breathing turned shallow. We need to go. Now. I wanted to agree, turn around, pretend none of this existed. But I kneeled and studied the prints. The toes curled slightly, gripping earth. The arches were sunken deep, and the edges, the soil crumbled differently, like something heavy had been dragged beneath the skin of the ground, buried, freed. Still, a voice, my voice, tried to rationalize. Could be prankers messing with us, locals screwing around. Mateo's voice cracked. Barefoot prankers? In cougar territory? Leaving prints bigger than mine? Silence stretched between us. The breeze shifted suddenly. Through the pines, we heard a sound that made my blood freeze. A scream. Not human, not animal. A long, ragged howl that scraped through the air like stone grinding bone. Even from the distance, it carried the kind of agony creatures only make when life has already abandoned them. Mateo bolted back toward the truck. I stayed frozen, rooted in place like a tree planted too long to move. Because that scream, I'd heard it before. Not with my waking ears. But in my dreams since that night, we found the bag. The static voices in my radio, the ones whispering in Lakota, had been trying to warn me. I forced myself to run after Mateo, legs stiff, lungs burning against cold panic. The forest seemed to lean forward as I passed, limbs stretching closer, shadows bending in ways that defied simple physics and sunlight. When we reached the truck, Mateo fumbled the keys, hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. I grabbed them, jammed the ignition, and peeled out so fast the tires spit rocks at the trees. Neither of us spoke on the ride back, but fear filled the cab like smoke. That night, I barricaded the windows with furniture, every light turned on, radio at my side. But nothing can keep the dark out when it already knows your name. Sometime past 3, the knocking returned. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps again, traveling along the outer wall toward the back door. I held my breath, listening as each thud grew softer, as though whatever it was had dropped to all fours. The wood creaked under shifting weight, and the entire cabin felt like a throat about to speak. Then, silence. A terrible, loaded silence that made my skin crawl, because I knew silence only arrives when something decides to watch instead of move. The doorknob rattled. I gripped my flashlight, heart hammering so loud I swore the thing on the other side could hear it. The knob twisted and stopped. Slowly. I stepped back. Another step. My heel hit the bed frame, and with a soft scrape, something slid under the door. A strip of old hide, tan and cracked, roughly cut into a rectangle. On the center, drawn in charcoal, a symbol. Not Lakota protection this time, but a pictograph I'd seen once in a briefing binder, the kind they never let rookies keep because myths aren't actionable. A symbol meant to represent a guardian spirit of the earth, except this one had been altered. The head was missing, like the guardian had been beheaded or had escaped its binding. A whisper outside the door, not air, not wind, but a low voice scraping earth. You should have left it buried. My legs buckled, the air pulsed cold, and the knocking resumed, faster now, frantic. But it was coming from beneath the floorboards. I couldn't stay another second. I sprinted for the back window, yanked it open, and dove into the night. My breath burst white into the cold. I stumbled to my truck barefoot, gravel cutting my feet with each step, the engine roaring awake like it feared what waited behind me too. As I sped down the forest road, my headlights caught movement between the pines, a shape running parallel to the truck. Huge. Silent. Bare feet splashing black soil, never quite letting me see its full form. Then it stopped, and I heard the scream again, loud enough to warp the mirrors. It wasn't anger. It was hunger. I didn't go home for 3 days after that. Slept in the ranger station, lights bright, the rest of the staff oblivious to what lurked in the timberline. But fear doesn't diminish when you hide. It evolves. On the 4th night, I jolted awake to the sound of static from the radio at my bedside. The transmission hissed like sand slipping through roots. A voice emerged, broken, stuttering, but unmistakably human. Cole, you freed him. Static swallowed the last word before I could hear it. But I already knew. This wasn't a spirit bound to protect the hills. This was something buried alive because the land wanted it contained. Something old, something that had never learned the meaning of mercy. And now, because of me, it knew exactly where to find me. I tried to convince myself I was safe at the ranger station, surrounded by radios, steel, and other people trained to protect the woods. But as dawn broke, I realized safety was a concept that didn't apply anymore. Whatever I had unbound didn't recognize buildings or badges. It recognized blood. It recognized guilt. I walked into the operations room with a weak attempt at normalcy, forcing a greeting to the dispatcher sipping her coffee. She didn't notice the tremor in my voice. Or maybe she did, and chose not to mention it. That's the thing about this job. We learn to pretend. I found Mateo at his desk, hunched over a stack of search reports. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with sleepless fear. "You look like hell," he muttered. "Thought you'd quit on me." I sat across from him, leaning forward. "We need to tell someone." He gave a humorless laugh. "Tell them what, Cole? That something barefoot and pissed off is knocking on our houses? That we dug up a cursed bag and now the forest wants us dead?" He lowered his voice. "We'll be psych-evaluated and benched by lunch." He wasn't wrong. There's no protocol for malevolent entities rising out of the earth. But my mind kept returning to that voice on the radio, the syllables cracking through static like a warning sent too late. "You freed him?" I looked at Mateo. What if Jasper wasn't the first? His expression shifted from fear to dread. "You think this has happened before?" I nodded. "And I think whoever covered that bag, they weren't just performing a ritual, they were locking something in." He rubbed his face with both hands, like trying to wipe away reality. We're rangers, not exorcists. But the truth was clearer than ever. We were alone in this. Later that morning, a hiker stumbled into the station lobby, shaking so badly his trekking poles rattled against the tile. His shirt had slashes across the back, fabric shredded in long, uneven ribbons. Fresh blood stained the tears. I heard it scream," he gasped. "Up near Cleopatra Ridge. I thought it was a person, someone injured. I tried to call out, but—" He swallowed, tears welling. He didn't finish the sentence. The station paramedic took him into the infirmary while I pulled Mateo aside. "We need to go up there," I said. "No, no way. Whatever it is." "Mateo," I said firmly, "someone might still be alive." He stared at me, jaw clenched, and finally nodded once like he already regretted the decision. We geared up heavier this time. Rifles, flares, backup batteries, enough to pretend we had control. As we drove up the service road, dust kicking behind the truck like smoke, I noticed something about the forest. The trees bent slightly inward, branches angled toward the road, like listening, like waiting. Close to the ridge, we switched to hiking. The air chilled as we climbed, the temperature dropping unnaturally fast. Frost clung to tufts of grass even though it was barely October. Every breath felt like inhaling a warning. The trail opened onto an overlook, a sweeping view of the Black Hills rolling endlessly, a land older than names. But the view did nothing to calm the unease pressing against my ribs. That's when we saw the cairns. Stacked stones, dozens of them, lining both sides of the overlook trail. Each one marked with a strip of hide tied around the top rock. The same kind of hide pushed under my cabin door. Mateo mumbled, "Holy hell." These weren't for navigation. They were graves. Tiny burial markers, warnings left by people long gone. I knelt beside one, fingers trembling as I touched the hide. The texture felt familiar, too familiar. Underneath the dryness, there was a faint stickiness. I pulled back sharply. This wasn't cowhide. It was skin. Human skin. My stomach lurched. I staggered to my feet. "What does this mean?" Mateo whispered. "That whatever this thing is," I said, voice shaking, "people have been trying to bury it for a very long time." But something had changed. Someone had recently disturbed these stones. Some cairns had toppled, their markers broken open, and at the bases, dark streaks of damp earth pulled from below. The scream hit us again, closer this time, rising through the ground like the earth itself was howling in pain. Pebbles vibrated under our boots. Birds erupted from the trees in terrified spirals. Mateo clutched his rifle, swinging wildly. "Where is it?" "Not above," I choked out. I stamped the ground lightly with my heel. Hollow. Whatever was coming for us was coming from below. We bolted back down the trail, crashing through brush, lungs burning. Branches tore at our uniforms. The scream pursued, echoing through stone and soil. The ground trembled, once, twice, like a heartbeat. We reached the truck, and I shoved the keys into the ignition, tires spinning on loose rock as we lurched away from the ridge. We didn't speak for the first few miles, like fear a physical thing lodged in our throats. "It's hunting," Mateo finally said. "We unearthed it, and now it's hunting." I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The native tribes buried it for a reason. We disturbed a tomb. "No," he said, eyes wide. "We disturbed a prison." Back at the station, we found a message waiting for us. The dispatcher saw it arrive. An envelope slipped through the front door with no return address. Inside was a small section of brittle parchment, edges burnt, smelling faintly of cedar smoke. The writing was in Lakota, but below it, in English pencil scribbles, someone had translated, "Do not let it reach the caves." I read the line 3 times, chest tight. The caves. The Black Hills were full of them. Wind caves, crystal caverns, limestone networks stretching deeper than anyone had mapped. If that thing found a way underground where tunnels threaded endlessly, it would become unstoppable. I looked up at Mateo. His face was drained of color. "The burial site we found," he whispered, "it wasn't chosen randomly. It was a seal, a barrier. And we destroyed it." A thunderous crash echoed from outside, something heavy slamming into the metal dumpster behind the station. Rangers by the window jerked back, swearing. I rushed outside with Mateo behind me, rifles raised. The dumpster was dented inward, the steel warped like someone had punched it from the side, but no one was there. Only a trail of footprints leading away. Bare, deep, black earth rising in each step. The track stopped abruptly where the forest line began, as if the creature vanished into the shadow, or beneath it. Mateo lowered his rifle, voice thin. "We can't fight this." I stared into the trees, pulse pounding. "We're going to have to," I said, "because if we didn't stop it now, the forests wouldn't just lose hikers. They'd lose all of us." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the station control room, maps spread across the table, radio crackling. I felt the weight of the forest pressing in from all sides. The owl calls outside sounded wrong, too urgent, too frequent. Dogs in nearby cabins barked endlessly, then stopped all at once. Around 2:30 a.m., the lights flickered. The radio hissed, and under that hiss, a deep rumble, like breathing. Not in the room, below the floor. I stood slowly, every muscle taut. The building's foundation vibrated, barely enough to see with the eye, but unmistakable through the bones. The lights went out. Pitch darkness swallowed me whole. And as the radio crackled again, a voice slid through the speakers. Low, ancient, buried, no more. The scream followed, this time so loud the windows shuddered in their frames. It wasn't the sound of something in pain. It was joy, hunting joy. Because night was its domain, and the Black Hills belonged to the thing we had unleashed. The scream didn't fade. It echoed on, a jagged blade of sound carving the silence into ribbons. I clamped both hands over my ears, teeth clenched, the windows rattling so violently I thought they would burst inward. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it cut out, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights flickering back to life overhead. Around me, the station building creaked, timbers settling as though they had been twisted out of true during the attack. Dust fell from the ceiling tiles. My radio hissed once, then went dead. I didn't realize I was shaking until I tried to take a step and my knee locked. Mateo barged through the doorway, still in uniform from the afternoon, chest heaving from running. "Cole, are you all right?" I nodded, though I wasn't. My voice stuck like barbed wire in my throat. "It was here," I whispered finally. "Right under us." Mateo swallowed, eyes darting around the room like he expected claws to break through the floor. "We can't stay here." He was right. But leaving the station meant stepping into the forest, into its jaws. I grabbed my gear and we slipped outside, moving fast, flashlights off to avoid drawing attention. The moon was nearly full, bleaching the black pines into silver silhouettes. Every shadow looked alive. The smell of disturbed earth hung heavy, thick as smoke. Somewhere far off, a tree snapped. A sharp, cracking report that echoed down the mountainside. Something heavy, something huge. Moving through the timber like brush was nothing more than tall grass. We kept to the road until we reached my truck. Mateo climbed into the passenger seat, hands trembling as he strapped himself in. "We need help," he said. "The state police, tribal authorities, hell, call the army." I shook my head. They won't believe us, not without proof. And even if they did, what could they bring that would matter against something that doesn't die the way animals do? He didn't argue because he knew I was right, but we couldn't keep running. And the caves were calling to it. "If it gets into the limestone systems," I said, "gripping the wheel, it can spread anywhere. Trails, towns, homes, all connected underground. We have to contain it." "How?" Mateo asked, voice cracked with desperation. I stared into the forest ahead. "We reseal what we unsealed." Mateo closed his eyes. "Then we have to go back." Just then, my headlights caught movement ahead. A woman staggered into the road, arms waving, her clothes shredded, cuts glistening wet in the moonlight. Her wide eyes locked onto mine, and then a terror carving deep lines into her face. "Stop!" she screamed. I slammed the brakes. Pebbles skittered under the tires as the truck fishtailed, coming to a jarring halt just feet from her. Mateo threw his door open and rushed to her side. "Ma'am, we're with the Forest Service." She grabbed his uniform collar with bloody fingers. "It's not human," she gasped. "It comes from the ground. It doesn't let you die until—" Her voice broke off with a choking sob. She collapsed into Mateo's arms, trembling violently. I leaped out to help him lift her into the truck. That's when I saw the second shape staggering out of the trees, slower, hunched. A man, or what used to be one. His skin was stretched too thin across his bones, his face twisted in an expression of permanent horror. His mouth hung open, jaw unhinged, dirt packed deep into the sockets where his eyes should have been. His fingers dragged through the gravel, nails splintered to the quick. He wasn't walking, he was being pulled by unseen strings beneath the earth. "Cole," Mateo breathed. "We need to go." The figure lurched closer, ribs heaving like a bellows without air, and then its neck snapped toward us unnaturally fast. It screamed, but the voice wasn't its own. It was the same scream we'd heard in the hills, the creature's scream, ripping from that human throat like the monster was wearing the man like a suit. We dove into the truck. The engine roared. Tires spit dirt, and the body, distorting in the headlights, dragged toward us until the earth swallowed it whole, right into the ground, like the soil liquefied under it, tugging it back into the dark. The woman in our backseat sobbed hysterically, curling into herself, rocking and chanting words too quiet to hear. We sped down the forest road, away from whatever force had claimed the man. We reached my cabin, the only defensible spot before the service station proper, and even defensible was a lie we needed to believe. We barricaded windows, we armed ourselves with everything we had. The woman, her name was Kara, drank water shakily and told us what she remembered. She and two friends had been backpacking off-trail near Cleopatra Ridge. They found symbols carved into a boulder and, curious, dug near it with their collapsible shovels. "That's when the ground screamed," she whispered, voice frayed. "It sounded like a man and a mountain and an animal being born all at once." Her friends tried to run. They didn't get far. She covered her face as tears dripped through her fingers. "It comes from underneath, like it's made of the earth." Mateo paced, panic bubbling. "So how do we trap something that lives underground?" Her answer was barely audible. "You can't." The cabin lights flickered. We froze. The vibration returned. Faint at first, like distant thunder, but deepening until the framed photos on my wall buzzed in place. Glass rattled. The floorboards creaked against pressure from below. It was coming for her. For us. The radio blared sudden static. Through the distortion, a voice emerged, stronger this time. The same voice that warned me before. "Do not let it reach the caves." The lights died. Darkness swallowed everything. Mateo clicked on his flashlight, beam shaking across the cabin. Something moved outside. A tall shape between the trees. Shoulders too broad, arms too long, head tilted sideways like a predator studying prey before the pounce. Its skin, or what covered it, looked like wet clay mixed with blood. In its chest cavity, ribs opened and closed like a second mouth. Kara's breath hitched. "It uses the dead," she whispered. "It wears them until they rot. Then it finds another." The creature stepped closer. The ground beneath us rose, swelling like a bubble forming under thick carpet, traveling straight toward the cabin walls. Wood groaned, something massive pressed against the foundation. Mateo raised the rifle. "Back off," he shouted into the dark. "Back off!" The creature stopped. Then its head snapped upright. Human eyes glimmered in its skull, Jasper's eyes. My stomach dropped through the floor. The creature opened its chest wider, and from deep inside, I heard a voice I recognized. Mateo, a whisper of pure torment. Jasper's voice. Begging, "Kill me." Mateo fired. The gunshot shattered the night. The creature staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, it released a roar that shook the cabin to its beams. It surged forward. Glass exploded as its clawed hands smashed through the window. Mateo grabbed Kara and dove behind the kitchen island as wood splintered, the wall buckling. I unloaded round after round into its skull, soil and sinew spraying, but the thing kept coming, because it wasn't alive, not in any way bullets could fix. It grabbed the cabin foundation and dragged. The floor split open. Dirt erupted upward like a geyser, swallowing furniture whole. A giant fissure cracked beneath us, leading down into a fathomless darkness filled with screaming wind and the stench of death. The creature pointed into the chasm with one long finger. "Go back to the dark." Its voice wasn't sound, it was soil vibrating through my bones. I grabbed Mateo and Kara and hauled them toward the door. The cabin shuddered violently as a roof beam collapsed behind us. We burst into the night just as the entire structure caved inward, dragged below like a sinking ship, my home torn from reality by the thing I had unearthed. My life, my safe place, devoured in seconds. The creature stood among the wreckage, towering, smiling with a jaw too wide. It took one step toward us, then paused. It sniffed the air. Its body twisted toward the western ridges, toward the cave systems beneath the Black Hills. And with a hungry, eager moan, it ran, vanishing into the night like shadow given purpose. Mateo grabbed my arm, breath ragged. Why didn't it kill us? Because we weren't the goal anymore. It knew exactly where salvation waited. Deep roots, endless tunnels, a home big enough for a god of the buried. "We have to beat it there," I said, because once that thing reached the caves, the screaming wouldn't be limited to the forest. We'd unleashed a nightmare that could spread beneath every town, every farmhouse, every life built over the skeletons of the past. And the earth itself would help it feed. We didn't waste time rummaging through the wreckage of my cabin. There was nothing left to salvage anyway. The structure had been swallowed almost completely, as though the ground had never wanted it there to begin with. The only thing the forest spit back out was my hatchet, half buried in the churned dirt. I grabbed it even though I knew damn well metal alone wouldn't save us. We moved fast, Mateo carrying Kara, me leading with my flashlight trembling in my grip. The forest was breathing heavy, as though the thing we'd unleashed had infected the land itself with hunger. Owls shrieked overhead and then went silent, the trees shaking as something enormous passed beneath their roots. Kara was fading, barely conscious, whispering fragments of warnings in Lakota. Every now and then she'd choke out an English word. Caves, guardian, screaming. But guardian didn't feel right anymore. Nothing about that thing suggested protection. It wasn't shielding the land. It was imprisoned by it. The people who buried it, they weren't asking for help. They were begging for mercy. We made it to the ranger truck in minutes, though every second felt like something ancient was gaining on us. I slammed the door shut, tires screeching as we shot down the forest road. The headlights cut through the dark, but nothing about the beams felt comforting. It was like shining a flashlight into the mouth of a predator. "We'll take the service route," I said, knuckles white around the wheel. "Closest entrance to the wind cave system. If we block that access, maybe?" "You think we can block the earth?" Mateo snapped, voice thin with fear. "That thing moves like a root. It can go anywhere down there." I didn't say it was a good plan, but we don't have time for a better one. Kara stirred behind us, eyes fluttering open. She clutched the seat like she was trying to hold on to reality. You don't understand, she whispered. It needs the caves, it needs the dark. Up here it burns, but down there. She sucked in a shaky breath that rattled her lungs. Down there it grows. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. We made it to the access point, an old research outpost beside a narrow fracture in the limestone, fenced off with a rusted gate and government signage. Even before we stepped out, I saw footprints leading into the opening. Deep, wide, bare. The thing had beaten us here. The air pouring out of the cave mouth felt colder than death, a freezing exhale laced with the smell of rot held too long inside a sealed tomb. I shoved a flare into Mateo's palm. We don't split up. We don't look away from each other. If something happens, you keep going. He stared at me, jaw tight. We're both getting out. But we both knew he was lying. We entered the narrow mouth of the cave. Each step deeper felt like sinking into the throat of the earth. Flares cast jerking shadows along the walls, uneven carvings and charcoal markings that looked ancient. Some resembled screaming faces. Others, twisted bodies pulled into the ground by what looked like enormous claws. This place, Mateo whispered. It's been a prison for a long time. No, I said, pulse pounding. It's a battlefield. Far ahead, a single torch flickered, not ours. A torch made of bone. Kara's voice echoed weakly behind us. Someone came here before you. We moved slowly, boots scraping over gravel as stalactites dripped mineral tears from the ceiling. The darkness felt weighted, like a hand pressing down on our skulls. As we rounded a turn, the tunnel widened, and there it was. The creature knelt beside a shattered Lakota stone seal, its massive form dwarfed only by the cavern it stood in. The bone torch cast sickly shadows over its skin, a patchwork collage of flesh and clay and something older, something that never belonged on the surface. Its back was a mountain of pulsating roots, each one burrowed deep into the dirt. Feeding, growing. Its chest mouth gaped open. Inside, instead of organs, there were faces, the faces of the dead. Jasper was there, half immersed in living mud. His lips moved silently, begging for release. Another face, a woman, screamed without sound. A child's eyes rolled in terror before sinking deeper into the viscous mass. Mateo gagged, covering his mouth. Kara sobbed, collapsing to her knees. The creature looked toward us, slow and deliberate. Not surprised, not angry. Amused. You chased it, Kara wept. You followed it right into its home. The ground beneath us rippled, slow at first, then violently, like the earth was inhaling. Rising hum filled the cavern, too loud, too deep, penetrating bone and marrow. Dust rained from the ceiling as rocks fractured. Stalactites trembled like sharpened daggers above our heads. You freed, the creature murmured, the voice coming from below, through stone. The strangled one. Mateo lifted the rifle, firing again and again, muzzle flashes illuminating terror in short, shocking bursts. Bullets punched through the creature, black mud splattering, but its smile only stretched wider. It took one step forward. The cavern shook. We stumbled back. It stepped again. Stones thundered from above. This time, I didn't wait for instinct. I grabbed the emergency detonator from my belt, a small red packet of seismic charges used for cave rescue collapses. They were never meant to trap a monster, but they would bury one. Mateo, get Kara out! He stared at the device, realization dawning into horror. No, you're not. Get her. Out. His eyes burned with terror and grief, but he moved. He hoisted Kara over his shoulder, sprinting for the exit, flare bobbing in a frantic heartbeat glow. I stepped forward, flare held high, looking the creature in the numb black of its stolen eyes. You were never meant to be free. It pointed at me with that long, accusing finger. My grave was stolen. You were never buried, I said. You were caged. It roared, a rage that cracked stone. Faces pushed through its body, human mouths screaming like a chorus of agony. I pressed the detonator, then hurled the charge at the stone pillar supporting the cavern. The explosion hit like a thunderclap. The ceiling tore free, molten dust and rock, falling in a tidal roar. The creature lunged toward me, hand outstretched, inches from my throat, as stone entombed it once more. The last thing I saw before darkness sealed the world, Jasper's face, sinking into the mud, finally smiling in relief. Blackness, silence, pain, but alive, somehow alive. A sliver of light pierced the rubble, and I heard distant shouts, Mateo's frantic voice calling my name. I clawed upward, hands bleeding against jagged rock, lungs burning with cave dust. When they finally dragged me free, dawn was creeping over the black hills. Mateo was sobbing, clutching my shoulders like he needed to feel bone to trust I was real. Kara lay wrapped in blankets beside rescue medics, eyes hollow but alive. We'd survived. The strangled one had not. At least, that's the lie we needed to believe. Because as the medics loaded me into the ambulance, a rumble whispered through the ground, a vibration no one else reacted to. Under my breath, I spoke words I didn't know I'd learned. Do not let it reach the caves. The wind brushed my ear like a warning returning home. And somewhere beneath the forest floor, something screamed. Not in agony, in promise. End of part, but I am ready to keep going immediately with the next 1,200-word section, continuing this same continuous narrative and emotional arc. They released me from the hospital with more questions than answers. Mateo and Kara were both transferred out before I could talk to them again. Federal order, I was told. Ongoing investigation. That's government language for we'll silence whatever we don't understand yet. They logged my incident report, stamped it inconclusive, and told me to take mandatory leave. I didn't argue. I couldn't trust my own voice yet. Weeks passed, but rest didn't come. When I tried to sleep, my mind replayed that cavern. The bodies, the earth breathing, the moment that thing recognized me. Sometimes I woke choking, imagining mud filling my lungs. Other nights, it wasn't imagination. I'd wake up with dirt under my fingernails. Then the dreams began to change. I didn't just see the creature. I heard it. It spoke from under the ground, from beneath my bed, whispering through the cracks in the foundation. No shape, just a voice rising like sap through wood. You stole my rest. Return what you broke. I'd sit upright in a cold sweat, gripping the frame of my bed until the shaking stopped. But the worst nights were when it didn't speak to me at all. Instead, it would scream, not with its own voice, but with every voice trapped inside it. Jasper. The missing hikers. The child whose face was fused into its ribs. Hundreds of voices braided into one rising wail, a wound in the air. I tried moving. I didn't care where. I just couldn't stay anywhere for long. I drifted from motels to cheap rentals, always scanning floors for cracks, walls for holes, watching shadows for movement. But sound travels through anything, especially through silence, especially underground. One morning the phone rang, no caller ID. For a long time I stared at it, afraid answering would give whatever hunted me permission to step fully into this world. But fear was a prison I'd already served too long in. I picked up. Connor, a gravel voice whispered, "We need to meet." I recognized him immediately. Mateo. I drove through the early dawn, each mile feeling like I was approaching the place where my sanity had last been whole. He'd chosen a location outside the Black Hills, a ghost town where winds didn't bother to hide their sounds. The buildings leaned in disrepair, windows like eye sockets staring at the barren fields. Mateo stood outside a collapsed church, hands shoved deep in his jacket, eyes sunken like sleep had become an enemy. "You look like hell," he said. "Same to you." He tried to smile. Failed. "Kara didn't make it," he said. The words hit like a rock fall. She held on for 2 days. Infection spread too fast. Her last words were Lakota, and the medics didn't understand. He swallowed. "But I did." She said, "It wasn't meant for light." My throat tightened. "I buried her with her people," he added. "They wanted to speak with you, but the elders," he hesitated, "they don't blame you, they blame what sleeps beneath." I stared at my hands, flexing the fingers that once dug up the coffin. "I did this. You didn't know." "I should have," I snapped. "A ranger is supposed to protect the land." Not. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Something is happening again." He handed me a folder, newspaper clippings, missing persons bulletins, reports smeared with federal redactions. all recent, all from near the cave system. The most recent, Jasper Thomas, presumed dead, body never recovered. That should have been the end of it. But the photo showed a muddy footprint beside the search crew's tent, human-shaped, wrong-sized. Mateo exhaled sharply, checking the horizon like the town itself was listening. They sealed the entrance we used, he said. Concrete and steel, but that cave is just one mouth. There are others, hundreds, some deeper, some older, some sacred. The word sacred echoed like an accusation. I opened the last document, a photo taken by Trailcam, timestamped 2 nights earlier. It showed a figure emerging from a sinkhole near a campground, naked, elongated limbs, skin like packed dirt cracking at the joints, a hollow where the chest should be. Inside that hollow, faces. One of them, mine. My breath stopped. This is impossible. Mateo grabbed my shoulder. It isn't dead, and it's looking for you. We froze. The wind shifted, and with it a new sound rolled in from beneath the prairie grass. A tremor, long, low, trembling. The earth beneath us pulsed once, like something enormous had stretched and then listened. Mateo's grip tightened. We need help, real help. No one will believe us, I said. They'll say we're traumatized, delusional. He cut me off. There's one person who might. He pulled a torn contact card from his pocket. Federal issue. She works in cultural resource preservation. She's been monitoring seismic anomalies since the cave collapse. She thinks the land is reshaping. Reshaping into what? He didn't answer, because the prairie answered for him. A hot gust of wind erupted from the direction of the hills, carrying dust that stung the skin and a sound like wood cracking under too much weight. Then I heard it, a scream, not human, not animal. The sound of earth coughing up something it should have kept buried. Mateo shoved the folder into my chest. Go. Now, I'll make sure you're not followed. You can't face that thing alone. He forced a grin, brittle but brave. I'm not alone. I've got half the ammo in South Dakota and a death wish on par with whatever that thing is made of. I wanted to fight him, to drag him with me, but I saw in his eyes that he wouldn't run. Some men don't fear being hunted. They fear not finishing the hunt. I got in my truck, engine growling awake, but before pulling away, I looked back. Mateo was already raising his rifle toward the horizon, toward a shadow moving where there should have been none. Our eyes met one last time. He mouthed 2 words. Keep running. The road stretched on like a pulse. Every vibration through the steering wheel reminding me the creature wasn't done with me. That beneath the asphalt, far below the roots and bones of this land, something vast was crawling upward. I thought about the coffin, the soil that clung to my boots that day, the way the ground had swallowed Kara's voice. What if all this time the strangled one wasn't rising, but returning, restoring a world that once belonged to it? I rubbed my arms, chilled despite the heater blasting. For a moment, I let myself hope Mateo would hold it back. But as the sun dipped behind the hills, the sky turning the color of bruised flesh, a sound rolled across the plains. A single gunshot. Then, silence. And after that silence, a scream. No, not a scream. A cry of victory. And I knew with a bone-deep certainty, Mateo was gone, and I was next. Yet something inside me shifted then, a resolve I didn't expect. Fear sharpened into purpose. I had caused this terror. I unleashed the strangled one, so I would bury it again, or it would drag me down with the rest of its stolen dead. The prairie wind hissed through the truck windows, shaping my thoughts into a whisper. This time, the earth won't take you so easily. The highway unfurled ahead like a lifeline pulled tight between me and the thing rising behind me. My hands gripped the wheel harder than necessary, as though the pressure alone could hold me together. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. Not yet. I headed east toward Rapid City because that's where the contact waited, the one Mateo insisted could help. Her name was scrawled on the torn card, Dr. Evelyn Crow. Cultural Resource Preservation Division, federal, specialized, suspiciously tailored to exactly the nightmare we were living. The clouds above the Badlands stretched low, smeared into shapes resembling ribs laid across the sky. A storm was forming, or maybe the land itself was stirring dust to hide what followed beneath. I drove faster. After an hour, I reached a rural service road branching toward the outskirts, where the mining companies once dug so deep they touched secrets better left alone. The GPS lost reception as iron-laced cliffs rose around me, turning the sky into a narrow strip. A security gate blocked the road, tall, fortified, crowned in razor wire. No signage except a number. Site 12, I rolled to a stop, heart drumming in my ears. Before I could speak into the intercom, the gate buzzed open. They were expecting me. A woman in a dark jacket stood in the cracked asphalt lot, arms crossed. Evelyn Crow. Strong posture, weathered face, eyes that had stared into too many truths and refused to blink. She nodded once, then walked inside without a word. I followed. The interior wasn't what I expected. This wasn't just a preservation office. It was a command center. Screens tracked seismic activity all across the Black Hills. Red lines pulsed like veins. A digital map displayed sinkholes appearing overnight, stretching in a pattern that spiraled inward, converging toward a single point. The cave collapse, the heart of everything we unleashed. Dr. Crow finally spoke, her voice firm but frayed with sleeplessness. You saw the strangled one with your own eyes. Not a question. I breathed out slowly. It was buried, sealed. You people knew. We knew something was down there, she said. But not what. The Lakota warned us for generations. The land remembers what we choose to forget. Her fingers danced across the map, zooming into the burial site. It was imprisoned by those who walked this land thousands of years before colonization, a last resort to stop its spread. Your excavation compromised the containment. My stomach sank. So this is my fault. It doesn't matter who is at fault anymore, she said, only who is left to stop it. I hesitated. It's hunting me. No, she corrected softly. It's following you. It needs a guide. It needs someone who knows both the land above and the darkness beneath. Her gaze locked onto mine. It believes you can lead it to the deepest chambers. Why me? Because you opened the door, she said. Now it wants to reach what lies deeper. What lies deeper? She hesitated, then whispered, something older. The floor trembled beneath us, a shudder that rattled equipment and sent a shock through my spine. Dr. Crow steadied herself against a table, eyes wide. That was not a natural quake, she murmured. Alarms wailed, lights flickered. A soldier burst into the room. Dr. Crow, we've got a breach in Sector A. Something's coming up through the floor. Sector A was here. The soldier pulled a rifle, but his hands shook. His voice did too. It's screaming down there. Terror surged through me like a cold flood. The creature had found me. Of course it had. It had been tracking the thread of guilt and fear tying me to it. A pounding boomed through the concrete, like fists the size of boulders. Cracks spider-webbed across the cement tiles. Evacuate, Dr. Crow commanded, but no one moved at first, because the scream rising beneath us froze muscle and marrow alike. The ground exploded upward. The soldier flew through the air, hitting the wall with a sickening crunch. A claw, no, a root, black as oil and twice as slick, shot into the room, thrashing wildly. Alarms blared. Sparks rained from torn cables. Move, I shouted, grabbing Crow by the arm as we sprinted for an emergency stairwell. Behind us, the thing pulled itself higher, the strangled one's torso emerging from the fractured earth. Its chest mouth gaped with sobbing, screaming faces. One face looked at me. Mateo. His eyes bulged in terror, a silent plea to finish what he'd sacrificed himself for. A roar shook the stairwell as we stumbled down flight after flight, emergency lights flashing red against cold metal. Crow shouted over the chaos. There's an access tunnel. It leads toward Jewel Cave. That's where it wants to go. Yes, she said, but we can get there first. We can collapse the root channels from inside before it reaches the core. The core. The word clanged in my skull like a warning bell. What happens if it reaches the core? She didn't slow. Didn't look at me. The land will split open. Her meaning was clear. There wouldn't be a Black Hills anymore. Just a gaping wound swallowing everything. We reached a steel blast door at the bottom. Crow slammed her hand on the release panel. The door cracked open, a tunnel beyond illuminated by emergency strips glowing faint green. Before I followed her through, I risked one glance back up the stairwell. A flood of roots poured downward, tearing rails and shredding stairs. And through the dust, I saw the strangled one's face. Not the borrowed one's, but the true one beneath. Eyes like pits, skin like drenched earth, jaw unhinging wide enough to take in stones and steel alike. And it smiled, because I was running toward exactly where it needed me to go. The blast door sealed behind us. Crow and I sprinted through the tunnel, breath ragged, footsteps echoing off the limestone. The ground pulsed beneath the concrete like a heartbeat sinking to the monster's stride. At last, Crow skidded to a halt before a reinforced vault and spun toward me. "You need to understand," she panted. "If we do this, there's no going back the way we came." I met her eyes. Fear didn't matter anymore. "Then forward is the only direction left." She nodded, then unlocked the vault. Cold air rushed out like the exhale of a buried world. As we stepped through, I felt the earth shift, not in violence, in hunger. The strangled one was coming, following its guide, following me. And in that moment, as a sickening realization bloomed in my chest, I understood. This wasn't about escape anymore. This was a descent into truth, into darkness, into the place the earth thinks of as home. The vault door sealed behind us with a metallic echo that felt like a gravestone being lowered into place. The tunnel beyond was carved directly into limestone, rough and ancient. This wasn't federal engineering. This was older, much older. The walls were marked with symbols the rock itself seemed to reject, the carvings bulging outward as if the stone tried to heal over them. Our breathing filled the narrow space. Mine was shaking. Crow's was steady but tight, like each inhale was a decision. A soft wind brushed our faces, coming from deep below, carrying a whisper of cold and damp earth, and under that something faintly sweet. That scent again, the scent of soil freshly turned over a grave. The tunnel sloped downward. Our footsteps became the drumbeat of a funeral march, the air colder with every step. Far behind us, through yards of rock, I could hear the earth splitting as that thing dug its way after us. Every few seconds, a tremor traveled through the ground, like the pulse of something enormous waking muscle by muscle. The deeper we went, the more the limestone changed. It became smoother, darker, shiny like compressed bone. The carvings stopped. There was nothing left to warn us, or maybe nothing left that would help. Crow finally broke the silence. This land has layers of history most refuse to acknowledge: life, death, and whatever came before both. What exactly came before? My voice came out raw. She shook her head. Some say gods, some say demons, some say something we'll never have a word for. I swallowed hard. And the strangled one is one of them. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. The tunnel opened at last into a massive cavern, so wide our lights barely touched the far walls. Stalactites hung like the teeth of a colossal predator. Pools of still water dotted the ground, reflecting the faint glow of bioluminescent fungus crawling over the rocks like veins. A sound drifted from below us, low, rhythmic, like chanting, or a heartbeat. The core. Crow pointed steeply downward, where a natural stone slide curved into darkness. The core is down there. We need to reach the lowest chamber and initiate the collapse sequence. If we can bury every tunnel at once, we might stop it. Might isn't very encouraging, I muttered. It's also not a guarantee of death, she replied, which makes it one of our better options. The sarcasm almost made me laugh. Almost. We sat at the edge of the stone slide. She clicked on a small wrist device, seismic charge controller, then looked at me like she was memorizing something she might lose. You okay to do this? No, I said truthfully, but I'll do it anyway. She nodded, and together we pushed off, sliding down into the dark. We hit the bottom hard, tumbling through mineral sand before scrambling to our feet. Ahead lay a vast chamber that should not have been possible underground, a cathedral carved by the earth's slow violence. In the center towered a monolith, a column of glossy black rock spiraled with ancient carvings and inlaid bones. It hummed softly. The air around it vibrated in my teeth. Crow whispered, "The heart pillar. What does it do?" "It keeps the earth dreaming." She glanced upward. voice trembling. If the earth wakes up, everything changes. Before I could ask what that meant, the ground shook violently. The strangled one was close. Crow sprinted toward the pillar, kneeling at a recessed panel made of iron and old stone, prying it open to reveal a console of braided roots wired to machinery. She slid the seismic controller inside and began connecting leads with frantic precision. "How long?" I demanded. "If I can set the charges successfully, 30 seconds. And if you can't?" She didn't bother answering. Her fingers worked in a blur, sweat rolling down her temple, breath sharp. Another quake slammed the chamber. A thunderous crack tore through the cavern as roots erupted from the ceiling like writhing serpents. Rocks crashed into the pools, water exploding upward. And then a massive silhouette emerged from the opening above. The strangled one dropped heavily onto the cavern floor, knees sinking into wet gravel. Its chest mouth yawned open, a choir of stolen voices shrieking in perfect unison. "Connor." It said my name the way the dead beg for air. Crow gasped. "It's using them. It's using all of them." Faces twisted beneath its skin, eyes frantic, lips pulled open in agony. Some I recognized, some I wished I didn't. Mateo. Jasper, the hikers, Kara, my fault. All of it. "You opened my cage," the creature gurgled, its words echoing through the stone. "No," I said, stepping forward despite the terror burning through every nerve. "I broke your chains." Its smile cracked wider than bone should allow. "You came home." I gripped the hatchet at my side, not a weapon, barely a gesture, but I wasn't going to die kneeling. Crow's voice rose behind me, terrified, triumphant. "I got it!" She slammed the panel shut and twisted a key. A countdown beeped through the cavern. 30, 29. The creature lunged. I threw myself between it and Crow. The impact hurled me across the chamber, my back cracking against stone. My lungs emptied. For a moment, the world flickered to static. Crow screamed as roots wrapped her legs, yanking her off her feet. She clawed at the ground, nails splitting. The creature dragged her closer, faces inside its chest mouth shrieking for release. 20, 19. I staggered upright, vision doubled, body screaming protest. "Let her go," I roared, stumbling forward with the hatchet raised. The monster turned its gaze on me, almost affectionate. "You cannot bury the earth." With sickening fluidity, it opened its true mouth. Beneath the faces, a vertical maw stretching from sternum to spine. Inside, something glowed. A molten heart of earth fire. I swung. The hatchet struck deep, and the monster wailed, not with its stolen voices, with its own. The ground convulsed, the air warped with heat, and the roots holding Crow recoiled. She rolled free, scrambling toward the pillar. The strangled one staggered backward, clutching its chest as black ooze poured like tar. But then, the ooze rose, lifted, shaped itself into arms, hands, fingers. It was regenerating. 10, 9. Crow shouted, "Connor, get to the pillar! You have to finish the sequence manually." I turned, sprinting toward her. But something cold coiled around my ankle. A root. It yanked. I hit the ground face first, tasting blood. Ahead, Crow's hand hovered over the final switch. 7, 6. "Do it!" I screamed. Her eyes met mine, full of fear and regret, and she slammed her palm onto the switch, but the root around my leg jerked back and pulled me into the air. The cavern erupted. A deafening rumble split the earth. The chamber ceiling fractured, the monolith cracking down the center as seismic charges detonated through every vein of the cave system. Crow flew backward, disappearing in a cascade of rock. The strangled one shrieked, its form collapsing inward as the ground swallowed it. And me? The root tightened like a noose. I fell, not onto stone, not into mud, but into a void. A blackness beneath the earth older than the creature that hunted me. Older than death. 5, 4, 3. The collapsing world above became distant thunder. The last thing I saw before darkness consumed everything. Hands, hundreds, reaching out of the mud, pulling at my arms, my clothing, my face, welcoming me back to the place I never should have escaped. 1, then silence. Total, smothering, cold, and a voice, soft as soil sifting over a coffin. "Connor, this is where you belong." I didn't fall. I sank. The difference mattered. Falling implies air, motion, gravity. Sinking means something else is accepting you, taking you. pulling you into its embrace like sediment covering a bone that doesn't belong anymore. Cold mud wrapped around my body, creeping under my collar, filling my boots, tightening across my ribs. My arms were pinned, my lungs fought for breath. Every instinct screamed to thrash, to climb, to swim upward, but there was no upward. There was only below. And the further I sank, the more the darkness changed. It wasn't absence. It was a presence, a vast pressure, like the weight of a mountain not resting on but looking at me. The voices came again, not screaming now but murmuring just beneath hearing, as though the dead were deciding what to do with me. Connor. I closed my eyes, though it didn't matter. I couldn't tell if the cold burning my skin was fear or weeping soil. Then, motion. The ground beneath me shifted, lifting me like a wave rising slowly from beneath the earth. My chest broke free first, then my face, gasping into vapor-thin air. I wasn't in the cavern anymore. I was somewhere deeper, somewhere older. Something like a cavern stretched out around me, but the walls weren't stone. They were compressed layers of fossilized remains, ribs of ancient beasts fused to shale, skulls embedded like knots in wood, spines forming archways long enough for giants to walk through. Between those bones, roots pulsed, carrying thick, glowing sap that cast faint amber light. Enough to see. Enough to understand this was a graveyard no culture alive had ever mapped. And I was the intruder. The mud released me entirely now, leaving me kneeling on a slick bed of clay. My hands shook uncontrollably. My voice cracked when I tried to speak. "Where am I?" A whisper answered, but not in English, not in any human tongue. The walls moved, the bones creaking as though they were breathing, and something stepped from the dark. Not the strangled one, something larger. A towering figure, built of the same earth and bone and root, though its form was smoother, more deliberate, like clay shaped by a hand older than time. Its eyes were two perfect voids. Its presence pushed against my thoughts, forcing them smaller, narrower. It knelt, the ground trembling beneath its weight. When it spoke, the earth translated the language for me, through pressure, through vibration, through instinct. You freed the sentinel. Sentinel. The strangled one hadn't been a prisoner. It had been a guard. I didn't know. I choked out. I was trying to help. You were trying to own, to unbury, to reveal what should remain forgotten. I killed it. I collapsed the caves. It's over. No, the voice was not a sound. It was fact. You severed the head. The roots still live. Roots crawled overhead, a vast network threading through the ceiling like exposed nerves. They writhed slowly, hungry for direction. The sentinel's duty is to stop us from rising. Us. The word hollowed my veins. How many of you are there? Silence. Heavy. Condemning. Then, how many graves exist beneath your feet? The bones lining the walls seemed to shift, as if counting themselves. I stumbled backward, almost slipping into the mud again. Every breath tasted like ancient rot. Panic clawed up my throat. My flashlight, miraculously still clipped to my belt, flickered to life with a shaky click. The beam landed on markings etched into the fossilized wall. Stories. A history of war carved in bone. Figures of humans battling towering shapes, entire forests ripped from their roots, mountains swallowing cities. A tall figure, the strangled one, bound by chains of stone. A final panel. Darkness sealing over everything. Crow's voice rang in my memory. It keeps the earth dreaming. If the earth wakes up, everything changes. This wasn't a myth. It was a cycle we interrupted. The enormous creature's head lowered, its void eyes level with mine. You are not meant here. I want to leave, I whispered. You cannot. Its hand, bigger than my entire body, gestured toward the network of tunnels stretching outward like neural pathways. You severed the roots of a sentinel. Another will rise to take its place, or the sleeping ones will wake. My spine turned to ice. I can fix it. I can stop this. If you'll just... The chamber shook violently. The sentinel's head snapped upward, attention shifting toward the ceiling as dust rained down like ash. The strangled one. The cave collapse had only slowed its approach. It was forcing its way toward the core again, through new tunnels, through instinct, through hunger. The ancient giant stood slowly, each movement a landslide in flesh. It walked toward a fissure in the chamber wall. a thin crack pulsing with fresh roots clawing inward. It pressed a massive hand against the stone, and the stone glowed. The roots recoiled like scorched snakes. The giant spoke without turning back. The only way to silence the sentinel is to become one. The meaning crashed into me like rockfall. It didn't want my help. It wanted my replacement. No. I backed away, heart punching my ribs. No, I can't. I'm just a ranger. You are a keeper of land, a watcher of borders, a warden of life, a curse and duty both. I felt my body pulse once with a hot wrench of pain that coursed through bone. Beneath my skin, something moved like a seed germinating. No. No. I fell to my knees, clutching my stomach, bile flooding my mouth. The pressure inside my chest clawed upward like roots trying to grow through my lungs. Stop, I screamed. Please. Become what you awakened. No, I won't. A scream tore through the underground, but not mine. A distant scream. The strangled one was breaking through. The chamber walls bowed inward. Roots split open rock as its form forced its way toward us. The ground heaved violently. Pools rippling as gravel skittered away from the monster, pushing down through the stone above. I struggled to stand, every muscle on fire. The ancient giant growled, low and thunderous, and the entire underworld responded like a heartbeat. You must choose. The strangled one's arm punched through the ceiling, a massive wet root slamming into the chamber like a spear. Faces stretched across the limbs, silent in agony. It clawed toward me, toward its successor. I staggered backward, nearly slipping into a bottomless break in the floor where mud boiled like tar. My flashlight beam danced across the void and landed on a human figure. Crow. Alive, barely, pinned beneath collapsed stone but conscious, eyes wide with terror. Connor, her voice cracked, desperate. Don't let it take you. You are still human. The ancient sentinel roared, the sound shattering stalactites. Stone rained down as the strangled one tore open the cavern above. The ancient creature turned back to me, its massive hand reaching forward, not in violence, but offering. Choose. Warden above or guardian below. My choice would decide everything. Become the new sentinel and bury the sleeping monsters forever, or cling to humanity and unleash the rising. Crow's scream cut through the tremors. Connor, don't abandon us. The strangled one lunged. The ancient sentinel braced, and I stepped forward toward my fate. Toward the decision that would either save the world or doom it beneath the weight of its own forgotten dead. I don't know if the decision came from bravery or something far uglier, because in the moment when fate split open before me, I didn't step toward the giant offering salvation. I stepped toward the strangled one, toward the monster, toward the thing that had been calling me since the first night I set foot in these mountains. Roots surged from the ground like veins seeking a heartbeat. They wrapped around my legs, then my torso, binding me in a cold, suffocating embrace. The ancient giant bellowed, a furious tremor that cracked entire ribs of fossilized stone along the walls. But it was too late. I wasn't its successor. I was something new. The strangled one pulled itself fully into the chamber, an impossible mass of bone, soil, root, and writhing human faces etched into every surface. Its great head lowered, stretching neck-creaked tendons the size of tree trunks. It stared into me with hollow sockets that somehow understood everything I was and everything I would become. Join. The word wasn't spoken. It was inflicted. Pain detonated through my body, every bone splintered, reforged, stretched. My lungs collapsed and regrew with soil-packed tissue. Roots burrowed into my arms, coiling through muscle like parasites. Crow screamed my name, trying to drag herself free of the rubble. I no longer looked at her as a companion. I looked at her as an anchor, a chain to a world I was leaving behind. The ancient giant, the former sentinel, charged. The earth shook with the fury of 1,000 earthquakes, bones rattling like teeth. It slammed into the strangled one, both titans grappling in a grotesque collision of roots and calcified flesh. The chamber erupted around us. I was thrown across the ground, tumbling through clay and bone fragments, and crashed beside Crow. She reached for me, her fingers trembling against my cheek. "You're still in there," she whispered, desperate. "Connor, fight it." I grabbed her wrist. not gently. Her breath hitched, not from pain but realization. My skin had hardened, bark-like textures spreading beneath the surface. My fingers had elongated, nails curving into hooked talons. "I am fighting," I said, but not for what she wanted. Every instinct in me, every ancient commanded through the roots, demanded power. Dominion. A guardian was a slave. A sentinel was a tool, but a conqueror, untethered. Above us, the giant tore half of the strangled one's face away, only for it to grow back instantly, fueled by the surge of awakening power bleeding from the deep. Faces along its body screamed, and I heard each voice individually, generations swallowed by the earth. They wanted release. They wanted revenge. I stood, my legs no longer trembling. Strength pulsed through me, the kind of strength mountains dream of when they rise from the earth. Rock, pressure, time, and hunger. Connor, Crow sobbed, trying to crawl closer. "Don't let it take everything you are." I turned to her fully. "I finally understand who I am." Then I stepped over her, not harming her, not yet, because there were older enemies to crush. The giant sentinel tried one last time to stop me. It slammed its fist down like a meteor, the impact carving a crater of shattered fossil. I caught the blow in both hands. The shockwave pulverized the floor, but I stood firm. The earth held me, supported me, obeyed me. The giant's void eyes widened, not in fear, in recognition. I wasn't replacing the strangled one, I was surpassing it. I drove my hand forward, talons slicing deep into its chest. Its roar became a landslide screaming down a valley. Roots burst from its wound, writhing madly as it tried to regenerate. But I was faster, stronger, a king beneath the crust. With a single wrench, I tore the sentinel apart, bones and stone exploding outward in a storm of ancient dust. Its massive form fell into the abyss beneath us, swallowed by the darkness it had once commanded. The strangled one, my predecessor, let out a sound halfway between triumph and terror. It bowed, and then it dissolved. The massive roots, faces, bones, all of it unspooled into me, merging with every nerve, every thought. The chamber's walls convulsed in submission. The entire underworld bent at the knee. Crow watched, eyes wide with horror and awe, as I transformed fully into something the earth had not seen since before the first sunrise, something the earth tried to bury. I stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of my new shape settling into place like settling continents. Then I looked toward the surface. I didn't think of the sun as something to admire anymore. I thought of it as a rival. Above us, the crust breathed, and I felt every root, every crack, every grain of sand. Humanity walked ignorantly across my skin, never realizing the dreaming giant below. But the dream was ending. Crow whispered, broken, "Please, don't go up there." I knelt before her, lowering a hand large enough now to cradle her entire body. "I won't hurt you," I said softly. She shook her head, tears cutting through dirt on her cheeks. "Not yet," I smiled. Not cruel, not gentle, simply true. "There are rules in nature," I said. "Predator and prey, buried and risen, forgotten and remembered." I leaned closer, soil shifting, cavern trembling in anticipation. The earth remembers its monsters, and I would make sure the world did too. I stood, towering, as the chamber split open and the first sliver of moonlight pierced the depths. Trees above rustled, roots awakening beneath campsites, mountains stirring as plates shifted. My voice carried through every tunnel, every cave, every grave. The rising begins, and the world listened. Night in the hollow beneath the Rockies had not yet given way to dawn when I raised my hand, sensing the trembling pulse of soil stretching thousands of miles east. I did not need eyes to see across the continent. Cities were just ant hills under the skin of a sleeping titan. And the titan had just awakened. New York, millions above. Concrete teeth biting into a land their ancestors did not understand. I felt the subways first, long metal worms vibrating through my veins. Screams echoed in those tunnels before a single brick fell, not from fear of collapse, but from the sudden primal terror of the dark remembering. Below Manhattan, where ancient waters once carved their paths, the ground began to shift, and then it rose. Wall Street skyscrapers trembled as if hit by a silent storm. Glass quivered in steel frames. Phones buzzed with notifications. Earthquakes rare enough to be news in seconds, but the warnings arrived too late. I clenched my fist. The island convulsed. The Woolworth building bowed in a slow, agonizing arc before snapping at the spine, floors peeling apart like pages from a drowned book. The Hudson surged inward as the shoreline sank in a sudden gasp, swallowing cars, street lamps, and entire blocks without a splash. Trees erupted through asphalt in Central Park, ancient emerald spears punching upward, growing 50 feet in seconds, roots writhing like serpents desperate to reclaim sacred ground. Joggers froze in place, unable to comprehend nature advancing faster than thought, as the boathouse folded inward, buried under a forest born angry. A subway line split open, a perfect wound down Broadway, and passengers spilled onto the tracks just as the tunnel lights died. In the darkness, roots slithered from the walls, finding ankles coiling with intelligence older than mankind. Screams traveled through sewer grates like heat rising. The Empire State Building swayed, a massive reed caught in a violent tide, and for the first time in its arrogant lifetime, the skyline showed fear. Above it all, monitors in Times Square fizzed with static. Then every screen flickered to the same single image, Crow's voice. Her face, captured somewhere far away, wherever she had fled, still smudged with dirt from the cavern. Connor is alive. He's not human anymore. He's coming, Crive. Her warning broadcast without wires, without satellites, the earth itself carrying the signal. People stared, frozen. Some laughed nervously, some prayed, some whispered the word terrorist, but the ground had no patience for ignorance anymore. Fifth Avenue sank. Entire storefronts folded into the deep as if a giant invisible hand pressed its palm into the city, slowly crushing it flat. Steam pipes burst in volcanic jets, scalding fog choking intersections. Cars honked desperately, but metal doesn't swim, and the asphalt beneath twisted like a serpent shedding skin, hurling vehicles into the chasms opening everywhere. Statue of Liberty's torch flickered, a beacon powerless against night, rising underground before the island buckled. Lady Liberty tilted forward, face first toward the water, a silent surrender. On Wall Street, people knelt in glass rain as the charging bull cracked, bronze splitting like an egg, roots pushing through the fissures, a new predator emerging from the relic of old greed. The skyline itself became prey. Skyscrapers toppled one after another, slow-motion catastrophes stretching across the horizon, and when they hit, the ground didn't shake. The ground celebrated. I heard every heartbeat in that city, some pounding with terror, some slowing under dust and weight, some growing quieter with each passing second. I heard the final phone calls, the broken prayers, the empty promises. I heard leaders in suits shouting through satellite channels, demanding answers nature no longer owed them. I felt humanity's illusion of dominion cracking like plaster over rot. And still, New York was just my first step. Crow watched all of this unfold from a ranger station far from the ruins, her eyes reflecting a world reshaped. While I stood naked beneath the mountains, reborn in a form too large for human memories to contain. But even as the cities fell, a fragment of my former self still whispered in the marrow, "You used to protect them." I silenced that voice. Protection was just another word for obedience. The earth does not beg to be saved. It takes back what was stolen. It devours what defies it. I raised my arms, a messiah made from soil and wrath, and the roots beneath the continent stirred, hungry for more. New York screamed, and I screamed with it, not in pain, in triumph.